time to paint our very large friend, the Primaris Repulsor Executioner. And I have an idea of what I want to do with it. I don't know if it'll look good. And it is clear I'm going to need plenty of coats of red since I'm painting red over black. I'm hoping that it goes better than it usually does for me. Yeah, doing this without a paintbrush seems like a bad idea. But I don't own a paintbrush. I mean a paintbrush. An airbrush is what I meant to say. So it's going to happen this way. Oh, great. Got my finger all up in that nonsense. Add a little bit of water to make sure my paint flows nicely. Let's try this larger brush. Yeesh. Looks rough, doesn't it? Well, I'm hoping it'll look better over time with plenty of work. Just doesn't look very good right now. I am wondering at this point, of the model painting process, when you're painting something like this, you're doing a bright red over a dark black. Does it make sense to just give it an undercoat of white before you start in with the red? I mean, I have the same sort of problem with white coverage over black. I don't know if it'll help though, the red. But interesting to see what other people do. Those of you who are painting a model like this with a brush, as opposed to like an airbrush. How do you guys approach this? I've decided to change what I'm going to do paint scheme wise. Sorry, I'm putting away the silly putty that I used to mask the gun on that turret. So before I put on this next coat of paint, I was just considering what it looked like, and I just wasn't happy with it. I had kind of decided on this after seeing some painted repulsors online, and not surprisingly, mine doesn't look very good. It doesn't look as good as those. Those were pretty awesome. So I've decided to take a different tack. The entire body is going to be black, and the turret is going to be red. So I'll continue with my black and red, well, black armor, red accent that is consistent with my my Deathwatch squad. It felt a little cartoony, so I wanted to be a little bit more real to life, and so I'm gonna go ahead and change this up. I don't know if I have to go reprimer this or if I can just go over it with black. I'm gonna try that first approach because it seems, I don't know, I don't want to prime it again. And I mean, I haven't painted it enough that it would be a big deal, but I don't want to repaint these. So I'm just gonna hit it with some black. If it doesn't look good, I'll reconsider. You know, blast it with some flat black from a rattle can. Okay, that's almost back to normal. I'm going to do another pass once this dries. Obviously the turret is going to get another couple of passes with the red. I'm using a different red than I've been using for my Deathwatch. I'm using this dragon red. And I don't know if that'll look okay, but I'm thinking that with my Primaris, maybe I'll distinguish them from the Firstborn. So I've finished repainting the Repulsor. Upon initial inspection, it looks, you know, basically what it's supposed to look like. But if you look closely, you can kind of see brush strokes and some little odds and ends here where the kind of the base doesn't quite match up with this repainted section. And I know that one of the ways that is recommended, you know, how to deal with this thing is to make sure there's a base coat over the entire thing. That way when you have to touch up stuff like this, you don't see these little details. I don't know, that's something I'm willing to spend a lot of time in. I'll see. Like, once this is finished, maybe I'll learn some lessons for my next build. But for now, I think I'm going to just leave it the way it is. And since the base is basically done, I'm going to go in and add some highlights. So the highlights are basically the only things that you're going to be able to pick out really from this model. It's going to be entirely black with, you know, some metal components here and there, obviously. But other than that, the body's going to be black. And so the highlights are going to really need to carry a lot of weight because the color is entirely on the turret. I decided just not to get fancy with the color scheme because, quite frankly, I don't have that kind of control over the brush. Like, I was going to do some kind of striping or whatever. It's just not going to look very good, and if I do little patches the way I was trying to, it looks cartoony. Not that the bright red turret isn't cartoony, but I'll take this over the other stuff. So I'm going to highlight, and in fact I'm only going to highlight the top stuff. I'm not going to really highlight the bottom stuff, because the idea behind a highlight, right, is that the light's falling on top of the hull, not everywhere on the hull. So I've got a little bit of uniform gray to highlight the black, and I'm not watering it down because the idea is I'm going to use a dry brush technique to do this. And so I want my paint to gunk up a bit. Oh. And so I'm just using the side of the brush to get just the tiniest bit of paint in there. So here's the first few minutes of edge highlighting this tank dude. And so as you can see, I'm doing just a very light touch, not the usual thick lines that you typically see with the heavy metal kind of look. It's just kind of enhancing the lines that are already there. Now, obviously, I'm not finished. I've done only kind of the front part of the hull. I haven't done any of the sides. I don't think I'm going to do the bottom. See how it's kind of bare down here. And so I will probably also do the turret. So once I finish on this and I'm reasonably happy with where it's at, I'll move on to this turret and give it some highlighting. Now with red, I like the way like a black edge highlight works on something like this big bright thing, but maybe I'll stick with white. I don't know. I haven't decided. The reason I like the black edge highlighting is because it kind of gives this a look like it's less edge highlighting and more weathering. And the same could be said here, right? All the edges have a little bit of weathering on them, and so if I do the edges in black, it makes it look like the paint is kind of wearing thin on each of these sides. So there's kind of a pro and con. They're essentially the same technique, but they convey two different messages, at least in my mind. So I have to decide on how to figure that out. Here's what I've got so far. I've just about finished the edge highlighting on the body of the tank, and it looks a little plain. I might want to go back and just do a bit more. You'll notice the lines are pretty fine. And so as they kind of go back here, they're a little harder to see. I mean, they're all there, but I kind of want... Let's see, I want to show... There's a couple of spots where the edge highlight is a little more substantial. I can't seem to find it. It's not particularly clean. I should probably go back and kind of touch up some areas. But I do feel like I want a little bit more. And I don't know how to accomplish that necessarily. Maybe a wider brush, since I'm using that technique where you just kind of dry brush using the edge of the brush. I don't know if that's what's limiting my edge highlighting, but it's also probably the only way I'm going to get such a clean line. Otherwise, I risk the mess I see here. And so maybe this is going to be a better angle, because here on this part of it, there's a bit more going on. It's a bit of a dry brush kind of happening on the armor panel. So it's a wider effect. So it's not just restricted to the lines, but there's a little bit happening on the armor panel there. So I want to go back and retouch the main hull. But the real problem I'm having is with the edge highlighting on the turret. So I'm going to take off the turret so you can see it more closely. So I've edge highlighted this in the same color as the bottom edge highlight. So it's the uniform gray. And it looks okay, but it's kind of washed out. And just not sure that this is the way I want to go. I kind of looked around the web to see what other people do, and it looks like they'll do like they'll put orange on the highlights. I'm just not sure that's the way I want to go. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try a couple with orange and then a couple with black, the way I wanted originally to do it. I had lots of uniform gray on my wet palette, and I thought, well, let's just make it an actual highlight as opposed to like a dark light. So a highlight versus armor wear. So this looks more like armor wear, but only if you can make it out, and it's kind of hard to make out. I mean, it's not bad, it's just it doesn't stand out, and I want something that stands out. If I'm gonna edge highlight this, you're gonna see it. So I'm going to try a little bit with the orange as is recommended on the website on the web, and then I'm going to try another couple of pieces with the black and just see what happens. I suspect I'm going to like the black better. So let's just see. It's my next bit of work on this. For the black, I'm going to go with this Corvus black. It's a little lighter in shade, so it might look a little more appropriate for what I'm doing here. We'll see in a sec. That's what it looks like with the Corvus black weathering. And I think it looks pretty neat. Like, it looks like it's a weathered effect. It doesn't necessarily look like a highlight. It just looks weathered. I can dig that. I can dig that by a mile. But in the interest of learning something, let's try what some friendly folks on the internet suggested, and let's use a little bit of orange, like basically something that's a brighter shade than the red that's on here. So I'm going to try a little dry rust. Is that what I want? Let's see, I've got choice between these two. It looks like the lava orange is a little darker than the dry rust. So let's try with the lava orange. I don't think I shook this up enough, so I'm going to have to mix it up. The yellow and the orange are kind of separated. Alright, so here's what that looks like. The orange over the red. And I don't know, maybe it's just my color selection, but I just don't like it. I don't. It doesn't look weathered. I mean, you can kind of say it's like a rust color, but compared to this looks grimy. This looks weathered. This kind of looks beat up. I'm not sure what this looks like. It looked brilliant on those Space Marines that they were showing off on that those images that I saw, but this is not the way. So the rest of this turret, I'm going to do this to it. It's going to have this edge highlighting, this weathering look. Yeah, I think this is the way to go. All right, I'm going to do that. Well, here is the turret, now with all its edge highlights. It looks pretty beat up. It looks pretty weathered. I'm pretty happy with it. And and as you can see, the highlights are they're a lot more substantial than the highlights on the body of the, on the main hull. So there's a lot more happening here. And one of the things that I've noticed is, so you see on this side, I just added the Corvus black over the uniform gray highlight that I had originally applied. And it gives it a very nice look, but if you look at this side, it's This is the part of the turret where I added the orange. And I didn't clean off the orange. I just went right over it with the Corvus Black. And as you can see, now it looks pretty awesome. It looks like it's weathered, but also rusty at the seams. Oh my goodness, what a dilemma. Because they both look really nice, but just for different reasons. And it's mismatched on the turret. And you know what? I actually don't care, right? So this spot, there was a little bit of rust on it. That's cool. And this one is just the normal wear. But it does encourage me, or it should encourage me, to pay more attention to the highlighting. Because, right, so yeah, it's sloppy. If you look at where the turret's going to go, there's some sloppiness there. It's going to be hard to correct. Fine, whatevs. My main concern is that it looks really cool with the two colors. So I went with gray first, and right over that gray, there was the black. And the black coverage over the gray is imperfect. Much the way, a metal object would be if it's been in use for a while. Same thing here, with just the black by itself would look a lot less interesting without that orange rust that's peeking out in some places. And you'll notice, for example, this back part, I didn't add. In fact, I hadn't even gone over it with gray. And there's no orange, and it's there, it's fine, it's just not as visually interesting as this piece. So this really does tell me something about my edge highlighting. Okay, so I've tried it, and it's working out, for me so far, and I'm learning some stuff. And right now, I'm learning the value of multiple coats or multiple passes. I wouldn't say a coat because you're not covering everything the same way. So this is an important lesson for me, and I'm so glad that I have discovered this because without this example, I would not try it. So I'm pretty excited with the way this turned out. So, yeah. So now that I'm pretty happy with the main turret, obviously the weapons haven't been painted and none of the antenna things. Yeah, I'm going to get to that for sure. But I want to take what I've learned here and apply it to this. Yeah, that means it's going to take longer, but that's okay. The whole point of this is to learn to be a better painter. So I'm going to hit all these areas with a bit more of the gray. Hopefully I can do a little bit more splotchy, so it'll be a little kind of uneven. I want just slightly thicker lines. Not too much, just slightly thicker. And then over those, I'm going to go over it with a different color, maybe like a white or a silver or something. Maybe not silver. There's already silver on here. So over the gray, I'll go with just a very thin white. And hopefully you'll be able to see some kind of difference between the two. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. Awesome. I'm going to try that. It looks like most of the detailing is done. And so I'm going to start putting stuff on the tank. This guy goes there, nice and magnetized. Let's just add this guy here for now. And we'll throw this guy on because now these turrets, they don't fit really nicely on these baby turrets don't fit really nicely on this larger turret. They don't. They're supposed to be, they're supposed to be glue free, but they don't really stick. Well, I guess. Okay. All right. You know what? That's fine. I'll take it. No. I just don't want to regret not gluing this down. They don't do a really good job of turning. So if it's not going to turn, it's going to get glued. And that's just the end of that. Bring this back. Oh my gosh. Everything's falling. That goes there. Oh. I haven't painted this guy yet. Okay. I'll take care of that. You go there. And I have to find where these guys live. So let me glue these on and I'll get back to you. When I said earlier that I was really close to done, I was technically correct. Technically in that all I have left is to, attach these to the hull. But there's a lot of these pieces. And while I guess I could just slap some silver on them and stick them up, the rest of the tank looks pretty decent. I don't want to take a shortcut in this last thing. They're little pieces, but they're all over the tank. So I will silver these up, but I will also hit these maybe with some highlights, or maybe with just wash. I don't know how I want to play this yet, but I suspect that after I paint the first one, that'll make itself clear. Now, previous to this part of the video, I've been using the Masterson's wet pallet. I think I have a video of kind of the unboxing and talking about it. I talked a little bit about why I got it and stuff like that. So, check that out for more context if you're interested. But the point is of talking about it here is that while I'm still using the wet palette, I am not using the wet palette paper. I swapped out the paper. So I initially had really good things to say about the paper that came with Masterson's wet palette. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was, it's thick, and it's supposed to, let moisture, travel across the two pretty reasonably. In short, I expected it to be better than the other wet palette paper I have been using. Some of which came from kind of a no-name wet palette that I bought, and some other sheets came from Army Painter. But I found two major problems with the Masterson's paper, and I don't know if it means that I'm doing something wrong or this is exactly how it's how it's supposed to work. I just don't know. But the Masterson's wet palette paper, it had two major issues. One, it had a crazy amount of feathering. By that I mean when you put the paint onto the paper, it kind of sticks to the fibers of the paper and it spreads along with those fibers. So I would find myself, I'd add a dot, and then that dot would just slowly spread out, and so I found it difficult to control where the paint was going. So I would put it in a spot and it would end up in a spot that was 2 or 3 times bigger than that. And I'm not an expert painter, but that strikes me as a weird way of doing things. And so maybe I just got used to using lower quality wet palette paper. But that was just kind of ugh. And so it got really bad when at one point I added some red paint that I was going to use, and I added just a drop or two of water to that spot, and it feathered out so much. So this is kind of where I usually put at least one spot on my pallet. It's the nearest to me, so whatever I'm going to use a lot of, that's where I put it. And so it feathered out to the point where it ran out of bounds of the paper, and it started leaking into the reservoir. I mean, that's a lot of feathering. So I don't know. I'm not saying I'm done with it. I'm just saying that I need to stand back and think about things real quick, because maybe I'm doing something wrong, but that was just kind of a no thanks. The other thing that I noticed with it is that the paint seems to dry really quickly. It was the quickest dry I've ever experienced. And that was after, I had soaked the paper for 5 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it was that the instructions, ask you to do. It says, soak the paper for 5 or 15 minutes. I forget what it was. But it asks you to soak the paper for a while in preparation for use. And so I did that. But every puddle of paint that I put on there was dry. And I mean way dry within just a few hours, like maybe 1 or 2 hours. It would dry before I got a chance to use it sometimes. And, the wet pallet reservoir had plenty of water. Plenty of water. That's not the kind of performance I expect. Even the cheapest quality wet palette papers did a better job than that. Again, I'm ready to accept that I did something wrong. I can't see what that might have been. I've been using a wet palette now for a couple of months. That's not enough to establish expertise, obviously. But in those months, nothing of the sort has ever happened. So, yeah, not happy about that. Not in the least. Anyway, I'm gonna paint the rest of these off camera. So I think the idea is to give them a full paint both sides with this gunmetal paint from Army Painters. And then what I'll do is once that initial base coat is dry, I'll come back and I'll do one with just like a black wash and see what that looks like. And then I'll try another one with kind of edge highlighting, which is a lot more work, but it might look nicer. So I'm going to give it a shot and see what it looks like. And I'll kind of show the results here to see, which way I should go. Yeah. Alright, so here are my samples. I wanted to see which of these two looked better. And honestly, they both look good in their own way. You can probably tell that this guy is the one with the wash, and this other guy is the one with the dry brush edge highlighting. And so they look different enough that I'm glad I checked it out. But I can't say that there's clearly a winner. I mean, they both look good in different ways. And ultimately, it's not going to come down to which one looks better. I mean, I want to say this one looks a little better to me. It's just, I kind of like that it's kind of worn down and what have you. That's just a little more shiny. Even with the wear that's implied with the edge highlighting, it's shiny. This one's covered with a little bit of black wash, and I don't know, it just looks somehow better to me. But it's qualitative, doesn't matter. Here's the deciding factor. Because there's not a large enough difference between these two to say, oh, clearly this is the way to go or this is the way to go, I have to find another reason to decide. And I think the deciding factor is going to be that this is easier to do. I can probably knock this out in the next 20 minutes. That will probably take me, I don't know, an hour maybe a little bit more to do it on all of those pieces, and then on all of those pieces. So, yeah, that's going to be my deciding factor. Thankfully, they both look decent enough that they won't detract for my my grav tank. So yeah, I'm going to go with this guy. I'll slap some black wash on that, and then all of those, and then all of the ones over there. And I'll attach them to the tank. And I think that's about it. Also, I just wanted to see does anyone else see Roger Roger on this guy? It's so hard not to see a droid trooper. All right, I'll be back. So I was gluing these on to the hull, kind of like so. That's where they belong. They've had a little coat of the drywall, the black wash, so it's on there. But I noticed a neat little thing I didn't see before. If you look at the part, it says R, which I assume means right. Now, given that this could be right or that could be right, it's a little less helpful, but I'm pretty sure R means right, and right, going that way. Probably the more appropriate way of thinking about this is starboard and port, but this will do the trick. So it's neat. Let me see. I have the left, what I think is the left. Oh, no, this is right as well. Okay, here we go. So this one says left. So that's a neat little indicator to help you keep these things straight. I hadn't noticed it before. It's not on these. So in addition to the numbering, I have kept the right and left separate to keep me from making any kind of mistake like that. But it's helpful nonetheless. It's good confirmation. And I thought it important for you guys to know about it because it could save you some time and help you avoid some mistakes. So, yeah. I'm going to glue these on. Oh, there she is. The completed Primaris Executioner, or Repulsor Executioner. It's all set to go and float around and shoot other people's pretend soldiers. So I will do another one of these someday. Probably like the Impulsor, which is the dedicated transport, as opposed to the hybrid transport and tank. But it's going to be a little bit. I need a pallet cleanser. Maybe I'll finish my kill team. Or maybe I'll do another Terminator, because that's somehow it goes quickly and I usually really like the results. Supply a little comparison here on my only other vehicle, the Space Marines Rhino or Razorback. And it looks quite a bit bigger than the Rhino. Although objectively it's not that much bigger, but I guess at this scale, things kind of add up. But if I kind of line them up in terms of width, the Repulsor is about an inch or so wider than the Rhino. In terms of height, it's actually not as big a difference as it appears. Top of the turret to top of the turret, it's probably, I don't know, maybe a half to a quarter of an inch, something like that. Without the turrets, things get a little different. But it does look taller to me. Lengthwise, that's a different thing. There's a good 2, maybe 3 inches difference here. I'm not really good at estimating sizes, but so maybe it's about 2, maybe a little bit more than 2. And so it isn't objectively that much difference, but it feels so much different. I mean, obviously, if you add the base to it, then you have a different thing. But that's part of the reason I took it off the base, because there's no way it's going to fit. So my models live in this case. So they live here. Ooh, Dreadnought for comparison. Ooh, that's neat. Okay. And so the Rhino fits in here very nicely. But there's, this thing won't even fit in there, right? And so take off the base. It's not going to fit. Might fit this way. I'm going to turn things around a little bit. How about an empty one of these cases specifically to fit this guy in there. And now I know it's not going to, well, I guess it will fit, but no way it's closing. Yep, no, it's not closing. So the way it's going to live in here is off the base. And let's see if it closes. Ah, it does not. This guy is in the way. Let's see if I take this guy off. What happens now? Nope, the antennas are now rubbing up against it. So, what I thought is going to have to happen is the turret is going to have to live separately, and this will probably put this in the storage pod, but. But there it is. So I need an entire bay just to fit one tank. This bay is probably like 30, 40 bucks. I'm not entirely sure. I'll look it up and put a little link in the video. Not a link, but just an image on the video. So there's a price of the tank, which was probably $60. And another 50% or so just to store it, which is not ideal. However, having said that, it's a nice chunky model, and I think it's a good value, and it makes sense that it's bigger than the Rhino because it's supposed to carry the Primaris dudes, who are supposed to be bigger. So, kind of in isolation, the size makes sense. In comparison to all the other models, it feels like it's on a different scale to the Rhino. Yeah. And it's not to say that this guy is too big. It might be that the Rhino is too small to fit 10 Space Marines in here. So, I'm not entirely sure how that works out, but these are just some observations. Would I make it smaller? I don't know that I would. It just looks beefy on this thing. As for how to store this, I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm going to keep this together. I mean, at some point I'm going to have to figure this out. It can't just live like this. I mean, for sure I have to magnetize each of the models onto the case. Right now it's just acrylic, and so if they can be jostled around. I don't know how I'm going to keep this in a reasonably attractive manner. If I do this and you can't see other things, I don't know. The base is really big. Maybe I will magnetize it so at least the base can live on the base while it's stored. So maybe that's the thing I still do, but it's not part of the model build. I'll just... there we go. So I don't know how this is stored in other storage solutions, but for my storage solution, it's a little on the hefty side. But that's why I bought this Orca case, because it's what I was going to need to fit that model in there. It wasn't going to fit in one of these. So there it is, man. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. And now it's locked in. This is where it lives. And it's done. Neat. Thanks, everybody. Come here. Come here. It's too big. It's too big. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. We'll get you something different. Sorry, kid. It's too big.